Hello, it's Deborah from the attic, and today I have the latest Simon Says stamp kit for you. This is called Love Always, and this is the February 2019 card kit. I'm going to start with some embossing powder. This is a full-size clear embossing powder. This is good for fine detail. There's some floss, and I'm going to just open this for you. There are 3 different colours, and this is a 6-stranded embroidery thread or floss. The papers are from a pack called Authentique Romance, and they're double-sided, so I'm going to have some decisions to make about which ones to use. These would make really nice, easy, quick toppers. Let me just flick through these on both sides for you. They all match together really beautifully. There are some, I love these colours, these are just so perfect at this time of year if you want to make some beautiful Valentine's cards. And those reds and pinks and blacks and creams, they're just delicious. Look at that, that's beautiful. There's also a piece of backing card, and because if you've seen my videos before, you will know that I will often adapt the packaging, so we're going to keep this and see if we can use this as well. There are 3 really beautiful envelopes. They've got this lovely pearlised effect on them. Sometimes they survive as envelopes, sometimes they get adapted into something else in the cards that we make. And there are 5 black double-sided cards are pre-cut and pre-scored, ready to be used as background cards. Then there are 4 colours of standard cardstock. Again, these match beautifully with the papers from the kit, and you can see something glinting below, can't you? I'm saving the best till last. I think the best till last. There are 2 really big stamp sets. Now this one is a fabulous background stamp. I do love a big background stamp. They give you so much flexibility. This one is called Rose Lattice Background. This stamp is really, really pretty. This is called Love Always. It's exclusive to Simon Says stamp. And the images work together really nicely. So for example, there's some music here and there's a bird here. So I'm already thinking maybe I can do something on the theme of bird song and connect those 2 stamps together. There's a large, I think that's a rose, I'm not very good at flowers, but there's a big flower there, and there's a little bouquet of flowers here. There are some hearts, there's a small, medium and a large that are solid colour. Then there's the outline of a heart and some dotty outlines on a larger heart. And this stamp here is a heart with a flower in it as well. When I first saw that, I didn't see the heart bit, I saw the corner bit. So I'm not sure if that will make it into one of the card designs, but we will find out. And then there are lots of beautiful sentiments. Love you always, I love you more each day, I love that you just get me. I mean, these are just beautiful sentiments. So that is the card kit, and we will see how we get on with our 10 cards that we're going to make using the kit. For our first card, we're going to use this beautiful background stamp, and I'm going to ink it up using a black archival ink. I've got a piece of pink card from the kit which I've cut down. I'm going to show you a way to use this rubber stamp in such a way that you don't need to use a stamping platform. You can get a really, really good impression just using pressure on the background stamp. I'm showing you different ways that you can do this. You can use, if you have a rounded ink pad, you can use the top side of that. You can use your fingers, or if you want, if you have a small enough block, you can use a stamping block just to burnish to make sure that this gets a really, really good impression. You could use the back of a spoon as well. And I found comparing this technique with a stamping platform, this gave me the better result. I'm going to use a black background card, and I'm going to stick the pink card onto the black folding card. I'm also choosing one of the beautiful little designs from the sheet. There are so many to choose from. I've gone for a pink one, and I'm going to use craft foam. Now this is about 3mm thick, and I'm going to use it for 2 purposes. I'm going to use it as a background for that little cutout that I have there, and I'm also going to use it for dimensions. So I've stuck my little panel onto the black, and I'm taking some of that lovely floss, and I've selected the darkest of the colours. Now this will be difficult for you to see against the black, but I didn't feel that any of the other colours really went with the colour scheme that I was using. Now I do own a proper needle, and I did think about going and searching around the house and going to find it, and then I decided probably we were all going to be in this boat. We've all got needles somewhere, we don't know where they are, we're just going to stay at our desks and we're going to use a pokey tool. So this is exactly what I've done. I've pulled the threads through to the front so that I can tie a little bow. There we go. I'll snip those off till they're a good length, and you can see how pretty this is going to look when it's all layered up and stuck in place on our card. I'm just going to put a little pinch of glue just behind that bow to make sure that the loops stay up and don't droop forwards. And snip those ends off until it's absolutely perfect. And I'm going to use a stamp block just to weigh that down to make sure it sticks nicely. And that's our first card finished. For card 2, I'm using a piece of black card from the kit, and I'm going to take the heart-shaped stamp. I thought this was beautiful, this stamp, and I'm going to stamp it 4 times onto this piece of black card, and then I'm going to use the clear embossing powder that came in the set to sprinkle over it, and I will heat set that. I'd like you to see the change as you add the heat to this, because it does make it quite magical. There you go, it's got a lovely, lovely shimmer and shine on it. So I've done 4 and I've cut out 4. I'm going to reserve 2 for a future card, but I'm going to save 2 for the moment, and I've taken one of the pieces of card from the kit, and I'm also going to use the beautiful music stamp. I really, really did like this stamp very much. It's very versatile. I'm going to add 2 or 3 layers to this card. I'm not going to cover this card. I just want a little hint of music notes. I've got the 3 little hearts from the kit ready to go on my stumpy blocks, and I will provide a link to those below the video because they are always very, very popular. And I've cut out some craft foam ready to go onto the back of one of my hearts. So the first heart is going to be glued down into position on the pink background. These little blocks are very useful. Don't just use them for stamping, use them for holding things in place when you want them to glue. It saves you sitting there for ages with your fingers on gluey things. I've chosen one of the sentiments. I've inked that using black ink and stamped it onto my card, and now I'm going to cover it with the clear embossing powder, and I will heat set that. This clear embossing powder really is excellent. I think it's one of the best I've used. It picks up great detail, it gives very, very good coverage. I was really, really impressed with this one. I've added some little black hearts all over the background of my card, and I've chosen a white top folding card, and I will glue the whole design onto this. Now you can see I've been very self-disciplined, and I've waited to add that final heart shape that has the dimension on it until I've stuck everything else down. I'm terrible for adding the dimensional elements and then trying to stick everything down on the background card. I'm trying to be more like a grown-up. For our third card, I'm inking up that beautiful background stamp again. This time I'm using pumice stone, and I'm going to cover it, and then I've got a piece of pink card from the kit which I've cut down so that it will fit onto a card, and I'm going to cover that over the background inked up stamp and make sure it absorbs the ink in much the same way that we did before. I've already stamped, heat embossed and cut out the larger bouquet that came as part of the kit, and I'm going to colour this in using 3 different colours of watercolour pen, a pink, a darker pink and a sort of a red, and I'm going to add in a green as well. I've got a watercolour brush there, but I end up not using it because the colours go on to the image perfectly nicely without needing the watercolour pen, and it also means I don't risk making that design too moist and therefore damp when I glue it onto the card. That's the finished effect. And I'm going to add my craft foam again. This time I'm going to use it as a background. So I've stuck it on and I've cut all around it, and I've left a little bit of a black line around the image, and that's the craft foam. I've got one of my little sayings. Now when I get these, I tend to put them all onto a piece of black card and then stamp them up with white embossing powder, and it just means that they're there and they're ready, so I don't have to keep doing that process. I always have a card that's ready and full of those little sentiments ready to go. Now I'm just going to layer things up using some strips from the kit to anchor that design onto the card, and I'm going to cut off any excess. I've chosen my sentiment and I've glued everything into position, and now all I need to do is glue the card onto a black top folding base card, and then finally, because I'm a grown-up now, add my dimensional element to it. And I'm using a block to hold that in place so that I don't get gluey fingers. Our fourth card is a little bit different. I'm going to take the heart shape again and I'm going to stamp it up onto some of the pieces of paper from the kit. Now I'm actually working on the reverse, so I'm cutting these out, and the bit that is inked up is the bit that I will not be using on the card. I'm using the heart as a template to give me the right shape so that I can cut around it. I've got 3 large hearts and I've got 2 little hearts that I've cut from the sheet of paper that had little hearts stamped on, imprinted on it anyway, and I'm just going to spend a little moment faffing around and deciding exactly where I want all of these elements to be positioned to make sure that I have enough ready. I've taken the 2 smallest little hearts and I've got my pokey tool again. I'm poking 2 little holes into each of those because these are going to be like little buttons, and we're going to add some shine to them as well. So I'm just pressing the front side of these onto the ink pad, and now I'm going to cover them in the clear embossing powder. I'm going to tap that off, and I'm just going to reserve these in the lid of the of that little embossing powder tub, so that I can get rid of the excess powder that I don't need, and then I'll bring the little hearts back onto my yellow sheet. I do apologise about these yellow sheets. I have an awful lot of them and I'm using them as waste paper, but I appreciate they look very ugly. I'm going to heat the clear embossing powder, and you can see the impact that it has on the hearts, and I'm going to do that 3 times. After 3 layers of embossing powder and heating, you're left with something that's got quite a lot of dimension and does look like a button. And this time I am using a proper needle just to pull some of the red thread through the buttonholes so that there are 2 loose ends at the front, and once I've done that for both buttonholes, I'm going to tie a little knot at the front, and that will hold the thread in place and make the button a little bit more interesting. Now I can position the hearts and I can glue them down once they're in exactly the right positions, and I can experiment with where I want the little buttons to go. Once everything is glued down, I can add some of the small hearts that are part of the stamping set. These are always so versatile and so useful to have in your stamp collection. I'm adding one of my pre-prepared sentiments to the bottom of my design, and then to complete the look of the card I'm going to take a black Sharpie pen and I'm going to add some little dots all around the outside of the design. Now it's difficult for you to see all of this on camera, but it just adds a little bit of zhuzh to the card, and it gives it a nice finish. For card 5, this is a little bit more straightforward, so I'm going to take 2 pieces of card from the kit and I'm going to cut them into strips. I've got this beautiful pink flowery paper which I really like, and then I have a tiny border of the stripe paper, and I'm going to cut off the excess from the pink base card that I've used, and these are 2 of the black hearts that I reserved earlier on. I'm going to add my little sentiment at the bottom of these hearts right in the centre so that I know where I want it to go, and I've got my needle ready with some red thread which I'm going to pass through one of the hearts going from front to back, and then from the other one going from back to front. I'm going to spend a little moment making sure that I get these in the right position in the centre of my card. When I'm happy with the length of the string, I'm going to glue them into position, then I'm going to tie a couple of little bows to add some extra dimension to this card. And that's our card complete. For card 6, this is a bit fun. I'm going to just make some little hearts to use as a template. So I'm starting with 1 small heart, then I'm going to use that as a base and go around it with a larger heart, so that I will end up with hearts that can nest inside each other. I'm going to do another 2 so that I have 4 altogether, and I'm going to position them onto some of the paper from the kit, and I'm going to draw around the outside, and then I'm going to cut all 4 of these cards from the paper. Once I've got them all cut out, I'm using my water pen to go around the outside edge to dampen it, because this will soften it and make it easier for me to distress the edges. You could use water on the end of your finger if you don't have a little water brush. I'm also going to scuff them up with the inside of a pair of scissors. I want to put as much texture and dimension and scruffiness into the outside of each of these hearts as I can. I'm going to glue them one on top of the other. When all 4 of the hearts are layered up and glued into position, I'm going to put them onto a piece of craft card. This is a piece of card from the kit which I've cut down, and then I've got one of my pre-prepared sentiments that I showed you on the card earlier, and I'm going to cut off some of these words so that they will fit in the inside of the heart, and that means that I can get the whole sentiment into the centre. And with that done, I can glue everything down onto the base card. Now I want to add a little bit of extra interest to this background as well, and so I've got a foam, I'm afraid it's yellow again, I've got a foam pad that will be great for absorbing the pointy bit of the pointy tool. So on this card we added black dots to add interest. This time we're going to poke the tool through and make tiny little holes in the background, and that will make that card just a little bit different. Then all I need to do is glue everything down onto a white side folding card, and we're finished. For card 7, I've got a post-it note. Now this is a sort of post-it note that has sticky all across the back of it, and I've cut it in half and I've used it to create a panel across the front of a piece of white card. I'm inking up the background stamp with the clear ink, and now I'm going to push it down onto the background stamp as we've done previously. I'm not going to take off the post-it note, I'm going to keep that in place, and I'm going to add the clear embossing powder over the top, and I'm going to heat set that. Again, I'm not removing the post-it note just yet, that stays in place. I've got distress oxide here called spun sugar, and I'm going to use a little piece of foam just to add some interest using that spun sugar by pushing the ink away from the centre of the card where the post-it note's in place. I've done that for the top and the bottom, and now I want to add a tiny bit more colour. I'm using Festive Berries this time, and I'm knocking off most of that colour because it's just too strong and too intense. And all I'm doing is brushing it from where the post-it note is out towards the edge of the card, but I'm not going to the outside edge. I want that to be focused in the centre, because the darker the colour is where the post-it note is, the more impressive the difference when you remove the post-it note that's been protecting the central panel of that card. I've got one of the sentiments, and I'm going to ink that up with black archival ink this time, and I'm going to stamp that into the centre. This is a nice simple card. It can be done quite quickly, but it does look very effective when it's complete. I've got Festive Berries again, and I've got a piece of scrap paper off to the right hand side, which I'm knocking off the first impression so that the second impression, again, it's a softer red. It's not that deep intense red, and that matches much better with the other colours on the card. And then all I need to do is glue my top design onto a pink base card. That pink round the outside edge just makes a perfect complement to complete the card. We're going to have some fun with card 8. I've prepared a little heart that I've cut out in a similar way that we did before, and I've got a piece of craft card from the kit, and I've got the clear ink pad, and I'm going to ink up a sentiment and stamp it onto the craft card, and I'm going to add no colour or anything. This is the clear embossing powder going over the top of the clear ink pad, and I'm going to make sure that this heat gun is nice and hot before I apply it to my card. But I want you to see the change, because although it's clear on clear, it actually comes out with a great effect. Stands out really well. Now that yellow heart that we cut out looks quite ugly, so we need to do something about that. It's only a background. I have a little hoofing tool here. You could use a bamboo stick or a kebab skewer or whatever you happen to have that's round, that's small, and roll a piece of paper around it, cut off any excess, and keep rolling that until it's nice and soft and pliable. I'm using tape runner because this is instant high-tack adhesion and it's absolutely perfect for this technique, and I'm now rolling that little piece of paper slightly smaller than I had it on my skewer because I want it to be quite small and quite narrow, and just squeeze it and make sure that that high adhesive tack really does hold it into position. It will do, I promise you it will do. And here's some others that I made earlier, and I've made these in different lengths because the heart is obviously, it requires more length in the middle than it does on the outside. I'm adding glue to my background heart, and the heart is only a template, it's just to give us something to work on. And now I can begin placing my little tubes that I've prepared onto the glue, and I'm putting the edge that is where the seal is down first, so that way what you see is a smooth curve on the outside edge. And I'm gluing in the longest pieces in place first, and I'll use the shorter pieces towards the outside. As you add more and more of these little paper tubes to your heart, add glue at the sides as well as underneath, and that will help them all stick together better. You can see I've got a little bit left over on the outside, but that's okay because I've got some little pieces that will be left over once I've cut around the heart shape. This can be a wee bit fiddly. The straight edges, absolutely fine. You can see that I can cut these with long scissors, but once I actually turn and I go into the centre of the heart, then I'm going to use a different set of scissors to cut each little paper tube individually. But for the moment, I'm making sure the whole thing is covered. I've added on a couple of little extra bits to those tiny outside edges that still had some yellow showing. It's a good idea to use a contrasting colour because that way you know you've got it covered. This is the finished heart. I think it looks quite beautiful, and I can glue this into position on our card. And once that's all glued down, our card is finished. Very different. Now for card 9, we're starting again with craft card, and I'm using that musical line again I liked so much that we used on an earlier card. Now this time I'm going to cover the whole of this background using this stamp and using the clear ink pad. This stamp is very versatile. I found out halfway through that if you turn it upside down, if you turn it the other way around, you can still use the musical notes still work. It's been quite cleverly designed. This is white gesso. If you don't have gesso, you can use white paint or anything that you want, but make it nice and thin so that you can still see the musical notation underneath it. I'm going to position the bird that I'm going to stamp onto this card later around about here, so I know that I want to gesso this area. What this will do is it will cover over an area, it will highlight the stamping that I'm going to add using black archival ink, but it still means that that musical notation below will show through. I think that bird image is beautiful. It's absolutely lovely. I have one of my pre-prepared sentiments, and again I'm going to cut this down because I want to have a different shape. I don't just want a straight line, I want to stagger the sentiment a little bit. And I'm going to glue it into position around and underneath my bird. To make my bird more interesting, I'm going to take a set of coloured pencils that I have, and I'm going to use a brown and a red and a yellow for the legs just to colour the bird in. I don't know much about birds, I have no idea what type of bird I think I'm colouring here, but I wanted to go with red and brown because that's more in keeping with the style of cards that we've been making. Otherwise I might have done blue for, say, a blue tip. Now I'm using festive berries again and one of the tiniest little hearts, and you can see me knocking off that first impression and using the second impression. That way it looks a little bit more misty. Once I have finished my design, I can glue it onto one of the black top folding cards and we're finished. For card 10, I've stamped and clear embossed 2 of the roses that are part of the stamp kit, and I've cut down some pieces of card from the kit and I'm going to layer these up. I'm going to work on these 2 pieces of paper to begin with, and once they're glued together I'm going to position both of those onto a black top folding card and I will cut away the excess. This is quite a quick card to make because you're just using elements that are ready to hand. I'm gluing everything into position. I'm not going to colour those roses, I'm going to leave them as they are because I think they stand out more like that. I'm going to say thank you very much for watching. As always, I hope you've enjoyed the cards that we've made today, and I'm going to leave you with some close-ups of everything. Until we meet again, take care.